And when a government's money fails, it is not economists or central bankers who decide what replaces it. It is the person standing in the market with something in their pocket that someone else will accept. Ordinary people make that call. They have made it 5 times in the last 100 years, each time within living memory, each time leaving a documented record of exactly what they chose. This video examines all 5 of those decisions in sequence. Named witnesses, specific transactions, documented exchange rates, starting in Berlin, 1923. Before the first case, one structural observation. In every hyperinflation, the sequence runs the same way. The official currency becomes unreliable. Prices begin to move faster than wages. People start pricing things in something else, a foreign currency, a physical commodity, a consumption good, long before the government admits there is a problem. By the time the state acknowledges the collapse and issues a new currency, the population has already been running a parallel monetary system for weeks or months. What they choose as that parallel system is not random. It follows a consistent logic. Whatever they pick is portable. It can be moved without infrastructure. It is divisible. It can be broken into small transactions. And it is already trusted, not because a government declared it valuable, but because the people around them already accept it without argument. 5 cases, 5 different countries, 5 different decades, the same logic, every time. By November of 1923, $1 could be exchanged for 4.2 trillion German marks. The number is so large it has ceased to function as a number. It is closer to a piece of performance art than an economic statistic. Adam Ferguson's Asterisk When Money Dies, published in 1975, documents a man named Hans-Georg von der Osten, who took 6 friends for a night out in Berlin on a single American dollar bill. By the time the evening ended, he could not finish spending the change by morning. The purchasing power of that $1, in a country where German marks were being printed around the clock, was simply more than a group of people could exhaust at a single night out. What did people in Berlin actually use to get through the week? Not the Papiermark, not faith in the Reichsbank, cigarettes. A single cigarette had a known, stable, widely agreed value. Butter, eggs, and coal moved through the city in direct exchange. A cinema ticket cost a lump of coal. A bottle of paraffin cost a silk shirt. The rate of exchange was set by whoever was in the room and whatever they each needed, not by any authority in Berlin. The Rentenmark, introduced in November 1923 and backed by a mortgage on Germany's agricultural and industrial land, eventually stabilized the currency. But stabilization came after ordinary people had already built a functioning barter and commodity economy around the Papiermark's collapse. The Rentenmark did not create stability. It ratified a stability that cigarettes and coal and butter had already been maintaining at street level. The Hungarian case is, by one specific measure, the worst monetary collapse in recorded human history. In July of 1946, monthly inflation in Hungary reached 41.9 quadrillion %. Prices were doubling every 15 hours. That figure, documented by economists William Bomberger and Gail Makinen in the Asterisk Journal of Political Economy in 1983, represents the highest daily rate of inflation ever measured under Kagan's standard definition of hyperinflation. The government printed a 100 quintillion pengo banknote. It also introduced the Atto pengo, a tax pengo, an inflation-indexed accounting unit designed to give the state a stable measure while the ordinary pengo disintegrated beneath it. The Atto pengo itself then hyperinflated. The population did not wait for resolution. Hungarian citizens who had access to Napoleon gold coins, the old French 20-franc pieces that had circulated in Central Europe since the 19th century, used them to buy food. Allied troops stationed in Hungary after the war brought US dollars that immediately entered informal circulation. People traded radios for flour. They traded watches for bread. The exchange rate was whatever the other person agreed to. On the 1st of August, 1946, the Hungarian government introduced the forint, backed explicitly by gold. The final conversion rate, 400 octillion pengo to 1 forint. The word octillion contains 27 zeros. The forint worked. It worked because it was backed by something that had already been functioning as money in Hungarian streets for months before the government caught up. Asterisk. The shape never changes. In January of 1994, monthly inflation in Serbia and Montenegro peaked at 313 million %. Daily inflation was 62%. Hourly inflation was 2.03%. The average monthly salary at the end of 1993 was $15. Belgrade store owners stopped posting prices in Yugoslav dinars. They posted them in points, each point equal to 1 Deutsche Mark. The Deutsche Mark did not circulate legally. It circulated practically, because everyone accepted it, and no one accepted the dinar for anything requiring forward planning. James Lyon's Social History of the Yugoslav Hyperinflation, published in 1996, documents the crowds that gathered at the Menjaknica, the street exchange offices, on the 8th of November 1993. when the official exchange rate had diverged 300% from the street rate. 300%. The government's declared value for its own currency and the value that ordinary people were prepared to accept were separated by a factor of 4. By December of that year, 95% of all government expenditure was financed by printing new dinars. The 500 billion dinar banknote, issued with the nominal authority of the Yugoslav state, could not purchase a single German mark on the street. The population had already solved the problem. The Deutsche Mark was portable, divisible, and trusted by everyone in the room. The dinar was none of those things. The choice required no legislation and no announcement. It required only that two people in a transaction agreed. In November of 2008, monthly inflation in Zimbabwe peaked at 79.6 billion%. Prices were doubling every 24.7 hours. In January of 2009, the Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe issued the $100 trillion banknote. It could not pay a bus fare. Kathy Buckle has documented life in Zimbabwe continuously since the year 2000, through books and a published letter series that constitutes one of the most sustained, first-person records of hyperinflation in any language. Her documentation captures what was happening at the practical level. Gold flakes panned from rural rivers were being used to buy groceries. South African rand and US dollars circulated alongside the collapsing Zimbabwean dollar in a three-currency daily reality that most Zimbabweans navigated without formal guidance. By the time Zimbabwe officially abandoned its own currency in April of 2009, an estimated 3 to 4 million Zimbabweans, from a population of roughly 12 million, had emigrated. Roughly half the remaining population required food aid. The mechanism of replacement was identical to what had happened in Berlin and Budapest and Belgrade. Not gold because a government said so. Not the rand because a central bank endorsed it. Gold and rand and dollars because these things were portable, divisible, and already trusted by the person on the other side of every transaction. Caracas Chronicles formally documented Venezuela as a hyperinflationary economy in November of 2017. By October of 2018, the 12-month inflation rate was 833,997%. The minimum wage in 2018, $5 per month. In October of 2019, the Associated Press documented a specific transaction. A man named Orlando Molina, a Ford car driver in Caracas, paid for a full tank of gasoline with a single cigarette. His words, on record: "You can pay with a cigarette. It's no secret to anyone that it goes for nothing." A gas station attendant named Leopoldo Sanchez, working in San Antonio de los Altos, accepted bottles of cooking oil, kilograms of rice, and packets of corn flour in exchange for fuel. These are not metaphors. They are documented, named, time-stamped transactions. In the Arco Minero del Orinoco, Venezuela's artisanal mining region in the south of the country, gold flakes from small-scale mining became the functional currency of rural communities. No government program created this. No central bank endorsed it. Miners and traders and shopkeepers simply agreed that gold was what they had, and gold was what they would accept. 5 countries. 5 collapses. 5 separate decisions, made by ordinary people in the middle of crisis, that arrived at variations of the same answer. Across all 5 cases, one thing did not happen. People did not wait. They did not wait for a government announcement, a new monetary policy, an IMF intervention, or an academic consensus on what should replace the failing currency. In the interval between the collapse of the official system and the arrival of whatever formal replacement eventually appeared, ordinary people ran their own monetary system. And the logic of what they chose was always identical. Whatever entered informal circulation was portable. It could fit in a pocket, survive a journey, cross a border. It was divisible. It could be broken into small enough units to price a cigarette, a kilogram of flour, a tank of gasoline. And it was already trusted. Not trusted because an authority declared it trustworthy, but trusted because the person accepting it had already seen the person next to them accept it without argument. Sometimes that was gold. Sometimes it was a foreign hard currency. Sometimes it was a cigarette. The choice was never ideological. It was practical, immediate, and made under pressure, and it was made the same way every time. This is not only a pattern from archives. In the third quarter of 2025, gold deposit accounts at Turkish banks surged 99.1% year over year, according to data published by Turkey's Banking Regulation and Supervision Agency. The total reached 2.72 trillion liras. Gold now represents 11% of all Turkish bank deposits, up from 8% a year earlier. 91.3% of those accounts are held by individual citizens. Some banks accept deposits as small as 0.01 grams. Turkey's annual inflation peaked above 75% in mid-2024. Ordinary Turkish citizens navigating that inflation made a decision about where to keep their savings. Not in a currency that had lost purchasing power. In gold. In small denominations. Accessible. Divisible. Portable. You already know what you'd choose. In Lebanon, the lira has stabilized at 89,500 to the US dollar, a roughly 60-fold devaluation from its pre-2019 peg. Lebanese citizens have coined the word lollar, a colloquial term, to distinguish dollar deposits frozen inside the banking system from physical cash dollars that can actually be spent. The World Bank estimates the dollarized cash economy at roughly half of Lebanon's GDP. In Argentina, for 14 years between 2011 and 2025, ordinary people set their own exchange rate in shops, back rooms, and street exchanges, sometimes 50 to 80% wider than the rate the government officially insisted upon. Two rates existed simultaneously, the one the state declared and the one people actually used. Those rates only meaningfully converged after currency controls were lifted in April of 2025. For a generation, Argentines simply decided that the official rate was fiction. These are not predictions. They are observations made in the present tense about decisions that ordinary people are making right now, using the same logic documented in Berlin in 1923, in Budapest in 1946, in Belgrade in 1993, in Harare in 2008, and in Caracas in 2019. Hans-Georg von der Osten left a night out in Berlin with change from a single American dollar that he could not spend by morning. The mark was so far gone that $1 was more money than a group of people could exhaust. That image is not unusual in the history of the last 100 years. It is, in one form or another, the same image that appears in every hyperinflation diary, every social history, every documented first-person account of what it feels like when official money stops working. What those accounts share is not despair. What they share is adaptation, immediate, practical, unsentimental adaptation by ordinary people who looked at what was in the room and decided, without waiting for permission, what would serve as money. Money has always been decided from below. The 5 cases documented here are not warnings, and they are not predictions. They are the historical record of how this process works, observed across a century in 5 different countries, by people who had no choice but to work it out in real time. The record is clear. It has always been clear. The question is only whether you have read it,